And I also want to thank Andrew Bacevich for that very generous introduction and for a great deal more than that. As you know, he has written a really brilliant series of books documenting the militarization of American life, documenting the abuse of American power and American forces, and the resulting corruption of our democracy. He makes plain the connection between home and abroad, between bold force projection, as they call it, and blowback. He writes of a whole succession of American presidents who have told us that America's great project in the world is to bend the arc of history to our liking in order to protect our American way of life. Reading Andrew Bacevich, you see that when you bend the arc of history, it looks very much like a boomerang. In his book, Breach of Trust, How Americans Failed Their Soldiers and Their Country, Andy quotes a line from George W. Bush in 2003. It's not a memorable line, but standard issue patriotic propaganda for the masses, the kind of red, white, and blue sloganeering that politicians slip by us all the time. As Andy dissects it, though, it becomes important. Bush says, freedom is worth fighting for, dying for, and standing for. Andy asks, who fights? Who dies? Who stands? He comments, the answer to this triad of questions impart to democracy much of its substantive meaning. I've written a little book that offers answers to the first two questions, who fights, who dies, and suggests some answers to the third, who stands, and that's what I want to talk with you about tonight. Of course, it is soldiers who fight and soldiers who die, and these days, most people don't know why or even pay much attention. That's what Breach of Trust is about, and if you want to know how we came to have this deep divide between our modern, all-volunteer, high-tech military and the civilians for whom they supposedly fight, then you must read that book. And if you've already read Breach of Trust, read it again. It explains how it is that soldiers have come to pay the price for the folly of America's needless wars. So who fights? The soldiers I write about, you could say, have come back home on that boomerang, because I write about those who return on a stretcher or in a box or in an altered state of mind with enough troubles to last them the rest of their days. But when they first go to war, most of them are just kids. Most of them come from small towns in the South or the Rust Belt of the Midwest or big city ghettos. Many are following a family heritage of military service that has rewarded veterans of past wars with some special privileges, access to higher education, jobs, and a nationwide system of socialized medicine. But so many kids who enlist are so very young. Many are badly educated, knowing nothing of the world and how it operates. Many are immigrants, risking their lives to become citizens. Many are poor and short on promise. Many have such a slim chance of another job, another line of work, let alone a decent wage or a promotion.
What was it that brought you to write this particular book?
It was a surprise to me that I wrote this book. I've written mostly about violence against women, and I have worked in Afghanistan since 2002, when I went to try to help women pick up the pieces. And I continued to work in Afghanistan I still work in Afghanistan. And in 2010, the military got the idea of forming female engagement teams that were supposed to, the military thought that women must know a lot in the villages. And so they got the idea of forming these female teams to go out and win the hearts and minds of the women in the villages. And the women in the villages would then give them intelligence on the movements of the Taliban and so on. Well, you know, this plan was never going to work. But they were taking young women in the service who already had full-time jobs in the military on forward bases and assigning them this extra duty of going out on patrols to gather intelligence. So I, for the first time in 2010, embedded with the military. And of course, I already knew a lot about Afghanistan. More, I would say, than the colonel who was in charge of that base. But in any case, I went to see what was happening with these women soldiers. And there were only 6 of them, 6 women on a forward base with hundreds of men. And the first night I was there, I took my sleeping bag out of, and came out of my tent because the air conditioning was freezing me. Came outside under the stars. And there I witnessed a very intimate scene that was life-changing for me. I had not liked the American soldiers I saw in Kabul, always going around in this kind of warrior strutting way and alienating everybody who they passed on the street. But as I sat under the stars in the dark, a soldier came out with a cell phone, and he didn't see me, and he made a call to someone and said, "I really need to talk to you." And then he couldn't speak. And I was made an unwilling witness to the disintegration of this man as he said, "I'm fine, I'll call you back." And then he slowly collapsed. And so after that, all the time I was on the base, I sat outside at night, and I realized he was not the only one, that there were many, many, many others. And on that base, every day, patrols were going out, and soldiers were coming back with men missing. And we never heard what happened to the missing men. And that's what gave me the idea. I want to know what's become of those guys. And it took me a year to get permission to embed in the medevac routes. But I did that and then just told the story of what I saw. I never would have dreamed this up on my own. It was that soldier that did it.